The Jesuits are the thinking arm of the Catholic Church, Father. What do you think?
Well, some aspects of his previous book, Brief History of Time, I liked a little better because there was an openness to transcendence. He asked a question at one point, what breathed fire into the equations of physics so that they would have a universe to describe? And I thought that openness reflected in the question.
It could have been God.
It could have been God, and it could have been something else, but he was open to the very possibility. I think by foreclosing the possibility of God, in other words, answering that question with the universe alone, the new book gets into a little bit of a problem, in fact, a big problem. It doesn't quite answer the something from nothing problem that really arises, because if the universe or the equations of physics or even M theory is going to breathe fire or existence into itself, then it literally is going to have to bring itself out of nothingness. In other words, if the equations of physics produce the universe that is going to bring itself into reality, you're going to have to explain, well, how could something come from nothing? How could the equations of physics produce
explain
this?
it simply by saying there was a creator?
No, I would just simply say you should remain open to the creator. Otherwise, if you don't, you're really going to have to say that something came from absolute nothingness, and that is a real difficult thing to defend.
Well put, well stated. We'll get Deepack's thoughts, and the panel will be with us the rest of the way. Is science the enemy of religion? Is religion a threat to science? We'll try to answer all these questions ahead. Leonard Mlodinow, the physicist and co-author of The Grand Design, Father Robert J. Spitzer, author of New Proofs for the Existence of God, remain with us, of course, and we're joined by Deepak Chopra, spiritual teacher and best-selling author. His new book, Muhammad, well, I think, based on events going on in the world. All right, Deepak, give us your overview of what we've heard from Messrs. Mlodinow and Spitzer, and, of course, Stephen Hawking.
Well, actually, Mlodinow, who I think in my mind is my Lord now, was gracious enough to send me the book before it was published, before it came out, and I read it 3 times. And I found it validating everything I knew from my own experience of wisdom traditions and perennial philosophies. 700 years ago, the great Sufi poet Rumi said, "We come spinning out of nothingness, scattering stars like dust." He said, look at these worlds spinning out of nothingness. This is within your power. A great sage from 2,000 years ago called Vasishtha said, infinite worlds come and go in the vast expanse of nothingness, which is consciousness, and they're like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. So I tell you, it validated everything. The only difference between me and my Lord now is that I believe this nothingness is not an empty void. It's the womb of creation, that nature goes to exactly the same place to create a galaxy of stars, a cluster of nebulas, a rainforest, a human body, or a thought. That this is the formless mind of the infinite being. As Father Spitzer said, it's the transcendent mind. Now, you know, Leonard will say the same thing, but he won't use the word transcendence. He'll say it's a field of possibilities, or he'll say it's a superposition of possibilities. In fact, he says in the book that at least 10 to the power of 500 universes could possibly exist in superposition of possibility at this level, which to me suggests an omniscient being. The only difference I have also is that God did not create the universe. God became the universe. You know, just so, okay.
Deepak, what do you think of Stephen Hawking?
I think he's the most important figure in our time. He has the iconic stature similar to Einstein in our time. His mind roams the edges of the universe. He's the most significant scientist. He has the greatest amount of perceived authority in the world right now.
Father Spitzer, what do you think of Stephen Hawking?
I think he is obviously a very intelligent physicist. I think at the same time, though, certainly capable of oversight, as we all are, particularly the oversight about nothingness, giving rise to something in the absolute sense, with all due respect to Deepak. And I think also maybe even some logical errors that might be made, especially in logical determinism.
We'll explore some of that. Leonard, are you going to do a book with Deepak?
We're talking about that, yeah.
And the theme would be what?
Well, it would probably be something related to what we're talking about today, his point of view, and I have my point of view, and we thought the discussion of that could be of interest to people.
All right, let's assume, and it's a fair assumption, that the three of you are being interviewed by an idiot. And it's a fair assumption. No,
Can we assume that there were three idiots sitting around the table trying to understand the universe?
So I don't know, okay? It's a very effective means of asking questions. I don't know. So the first simple question, I'll start with you, Leonard. Who created the nothing? How can something come out of nothing? Where did the nothing come from? Does there have to be a something, a beginning?
So around the turn of the 20th century, physicists started to discover that the actual nature of the universe isn't quite what people thought it was. Before then, people pretty much looked around them and had theories of the universe, Newton's laws and Maxwell's equations that corresponded to what we see with our senses and the way we think with our minds. But then physicists started to look deeper. And when they started to look deeper, a lot of counterintuitive and hard to understand concepts came up, which can be understood and described with mathematics. And one of them is this concept of nothingness. And according to quantum theory, there is no such thing as nothingness. You can have nothingness in quantum theory, but from that, things will arise. They will pop into existence and out of existence again. And so I know that that's hard to understand and hard to accept, but that particular phenomenon has been tested and confirmed many times in the laboratory.
So there can be a nothing.
So there's nothing, but nothing is not stable. Things come and go from nothingness.
And nothing doesn't have to have a beginning to the nothing.
Yeah. Well, the question of time is also one that you have to be careful about, because one of the intuitive ideas that we have is the Newtonian theory of time and space, which is it's a framework. You know, it's like we live on the stage, and there's coordinates on the stage, right and left, and time moves forward in a linear fashion, and what we do doesn't affect time and space. But Einstein found that that's not true, that actually under certain more extreme conditions, which are not our usual conditions, you have to take into account how the actors in the stage interact. So time can become part of space, time and space affect each other. And as you go back in time, when the universe is very, very small, time ceases to have the meaning that we think of it as having today. And so you can't really go back. You can't follow time backwards like it's a railroad track and you're going to get to the station, and that's the beginning. Okay, so that question of what's time zero is a difficult question to phrase.
We'll come back with more of your blog comments, too. Don't go away.
It is reasonable to ask who or what created the universe, but if the answer is God, then the question has merely been deflected to that of who created God. In this view, it is accepted that some entity exists that needs not a creator, and that entity is called God. This is known as the first cause argument for the existence of God. We claim, however, that it is possible to answer these questions purely within the realm of science, and without invoking any divine beings.
By the way, Deepak Chopra has written a blog exclusive to us. It's called Taking a Stand, Muhammad in the Age of Jihad. Go to cnn.com/Larry King to read it. We have some blog responses. We asked a question out to all of our blogsters, if we might call them that. Do you believe God created the universe? We posted it on Larry King Live blog and at cnn.com/belief. And your comments. Even if there is no need for a God to create the universe, that does not mean God did not create it. Right, Father?
I would concur with that, yes, because the need for it is our possibility of recognizing the need, and we could be fallacious in recognizing that.
Another one says, Deepak, I go for what Einstein said about believing in a God who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not a God who concerns himself with the fates and actions of human beings. You agree with that, Deepak?
I do, and that's exactly what Spinoza said in a different kind of language. When you ask about what was there before the beginning, that's a very relevant question. And, you know, when Leonard answered it, I would like to also address it, because you say, what created God, or what created the nothingness? If nothing is outside of space-time, it is actually not in space-time. Space-time are an activity of that nothingness, a pattern of behavior of that nothingness, as are all the laws of nature. But the laws of nature are not inscribed somewhere in a book. They exist in the consciousness of mathematicians. No equation will ever make the universe work. The equations merely describe the behavior of the universe. So, you know, when I think of mathematics, I think of it actually as the language of God. And when I think of physicists like Leonard and Stephen Hawking, I think that's God explaining God to God using mathematics, basically. And, you know, Stephen will acknowledge, I think Leonard will acknowledge too, that there's a theorem in mathematics called Gödel's theorem, which actually states very explicitly that no mathematical model will ever offer a complete explanation of what's going on, because Gödel's theorem invokes almost a break from mathematical logic. Leonard, would you say that?
Well, actually, I would agree with almost everything you just said.
Okay.
I would, with maybe some fine tuning of nature. But the one thing that I would have to think about is what you say about Gödel's theorem, because that applies, for one thing, to axiomatic systems, and physics is not an axiomatic system. We wish it was, and people have tried to make it an axiomatic system. But
Meaning, break that down.
Meaning that you state a few mathematical principles and derive everything using mathematics from those principles. And that's not what science is. Science is based on ideas that come from observation and then these consequences.
Do you believe something happens to us when we die?
Well, I don't think what I...
Just an offhand, do you?
You know, I don't think that what I personally believe matters very much.
Is there a physics explanation for what happens?
No, there's no physics explanation. In fact, there's no physics explanation for consciousness, and as far as I can tell, I've never seen consciousness even defined in a way that a scientist can really deal with.
But Leonard, you're speaking to us.
Hold it, Deepak. Hold it, Deepak. Can physics explain birth?
I think physics can explain material birth. If there is some other dimension to human beings, say a spirit or a soul, that is not reducible to material existence or physics, then no, physics would not be able to explain the human being completely at birth.
Another blog. God is a personal matter and is interpreted in many ways. Science must be proven or disproven, has no import to beliefs. No, the universe was not created by a God. That is one of the blog responses. Another is, Stephen Hawking is God's gift to all of us. Thank the Creator, he provides us with such men, because they're a blessing in disguise, causing all of us to challenge the integrity of our own belief systems. Would you agree with that, Deepak?
Yes, actually, I think in many ways belief is a cover-up for insecurity. You only believe in things that you're not sure about. If I asked you the question, do you believe in electricity, you'd say that's a ridiculous question, or gravity. So I think experience of God, knowledge of God is more important than belief in God, or faith. Faith is the ability to step into the unknown. And that is what real faith is, to be open-ended. And, you know, things like physics and mathematics cannot even explain how biological organisms function as an integrated whole. How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at the same time? No physical explanation yet. And, you know, when I talk to Leonard, he says one day, you know, Leonard says one day we'll have an explanation. I said that's a promissory note. And in the current economic situation, I don't take promissory notes.
Answering that question with the universe alone The new book gets into a little bit of a problem, in fact, a big problem. It doesn't quite answer the something from nothing problem that really arises, because if the universe or the equations of physics or even M theory is going to breathe fire or existence into itself, breathed fire into the equations of physics so that they would have a universe to describe. And I thought that openness reflected in the question.
It could have been God.
It could have been God. It could have been something else, but he was open to the very possibility. I think by foreclosing the possibility of God, in other words, I would just simply say you should remain open to the Creator. Otherwise, if you don't, you're really going to have to say that something came from absolute nothingness. And that is a real difficult thing to defend.
Well put, well stated. We'll get Deepack's thoughts, and the panel will be with us the rest of the way. Is science the Jesuits are the thinking arm of the Catholic Church, Father? What do you think?
Well, some aspects of his previous book, Brief History of Time, I liked a little better because there was an openness to transcendence. He asked a question at one point, then it literally is going to have to bring itself out of nothingness. In other words, if the equations of physics produce the universe that is going to bring itself into reality, you're going to have to explain, well, how could something come from nothing? How could the equations of physics produce this?
You explain it simply by saying there was a creator.